on the rocks.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We've known each other, what, 2 years, Judy?
Maybe 3 years now.
No, it's like 3 years.
20
I've been
years.
struggling for the last 4 years.
Right.
Right? Since
Well,
2020.
it's 2020. Right.
Yeah.
So
For, those of you who don't realize who she is an attorney, a family attorney at that, right? Why do they call family attorney? They should call divorce attorney, right?
they don't use the word divorce anymore.
Why?
It's a dissolution of marriage.
I know, why? What's wrong with divorce?
That's a very good question. I have no idea.
But, you don't...
Everybody in the general populace calls it divorce.
Right.
But officially
Is
it's...
it politically correct to call that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's...
Jesus.
let's go. Yes, exactly.
But why is it, when you...
It's a partnership. So
Right,
you
that's fine.
dissolve a
So
partnership.
it's like a corporation, right?
No, no.
Or the partnership,
Partnership.
Yeah. Right, okay.
Which
So-
nobody knows about when they get married.
Right. So when the family attorney gets involved, it's usually a divorce situation.
Right.
Right? Not in the marriage situation. Not when you're starting a family, you don't
No.
come in.
No.
When it's breaking up, you do.
Right.
So might as well just call it a divorce attorney.
I don't
Right.
know.
Now, how long have you been doing this?
30 years.
Why divorce? Or why family?
That's who walked in the door.
Huh?
That's who walked
Really?
in the door. Yeah.
So how,
See,
so-
everybody who is married and wants to dissolve their marriage has to go through the courts, either on their own or with help. In
Mm,
other words, if you get in a fight with your neighbor,
yeah.
there's a way to work it out. You don't have to go to court. But if you want a divorce, you have to go to court.
Is it only especially in California?
No.
Or is it all over?
All over.
50 states.
Yeah,
Yeah.
50 states.
So, but I know that when I first got involved or started associating with an attorney, right? That was when I was 21. Straight out of college, I was in Chicago and I was managing this negotiation between Japanese company and U.S. company in automotive industry. And we hired Baker McKenzie, a big firm, large, international global firm, and their headquarters was in Chicago. And I met with a senior partner who was very, confident and very trustworthy and very, what do you call it?
Astute.
Professional.
Yes.
Right? And I met with their associates and partners, and they were very, nice and professional. And then the next time I dealt with, in financial industry, we dealt with a big firm like Dewey Ballantyne and Morrison Forster and people like that, right? Very professional, corporate.
Right. But see, there aren't any emotions involved in that.
Well, but when you have a negotiation, when I have a litigation, stuff like that, you do have emotions between two companies and damages and stuff like that.
Okay.
But when I got here and when I got involved in the family law, my God, everybody is an individual attorneys, right? Mostly, is it?
Yes.
And
There are several really big firms. Well, not big in that sense,
right,
because they're not they're not national, because family law is specifically state law.
right. And then I got involved with an attorney who are not very ethical, to say the least. When you hear liar type of thing, that was typical family law
Right.
lawyers, right?
Right.
And how do they get away with it? I just don't understand it. That's why my divorce took 4 years. Okay. And you saw what was going on. It was what the fuck is going on here?
Right.
And you came in to help me, all right?
I think that one of the biggest problems is when the attorney takes on the emotions of the client,
Okay.
and it's their fight,
Right.
and they buy, they drink the Kool-Aid or buy the story of their client, and that might be necessary for them to advocate for their client
Okay.
from their own point of view. In other
But-
words, they have to believe in what they're doing.
But isn't it true that as an officer of the court, you're supposed to say, you're not supposed to do this? Don't do this, do this. This is the right way to do it. Or, be
Absolutely.
ethical and be honest about it.
Yes. As
Right?
an officer of the court, you can't misrepresent. You can't knowingly misrepresent.
Well, my opposing counsel did. many, many, many times when I was representing myself. And there's nothing happened because of that. And the fact is, I mean, everybody's listening to this figuring out we don't want to get married anymore. But judges in family court, I mean, it's to me, the very unprofessional, very inexperienced transit judges who presides over your life and your children's life and their future. It's ridiculous.
But see, how do they really do that? I mean, LA County is the largest court system in the country.
Let me ask you, how many attorneys are there, do you know, in California?
I don't really know.
But it's the most attorneys, right, is California?
I would think so, yes.
Right? But also it's the most difficult to pass the bar.
That's what I've heard, yes.
Why is that? Why is it
we
so
have
difficult and why are so
That's
many?
what I would say.
Yeah, but then everybody comes here and become an attorney? I mean, I just,
People, well, I mean, there are several, not several. There are lots of attorneys that come here after being practicing in another state,
Okay.
and it's probably the weather. But-
Everybody comes for weather. So, I mean, let me just digress for a little bit. How did you become an attorney? Why did you become an attorney?
okay,
And when did you become an attorney?
those are all very good questions.
Yes.
It's a second career for me.
Okay, what were you doing before?
A&R administration at a label.
A&R?
Yeah.
Oh,
Administration at a label.
Admin,
handling
okay.
the budgets.
Okay.
Um,
You're a number person. Kind of.
yeah, I my job was a
Okay.
number person,
Oh,
so I eventually got laid off. The department switched, and it was, I had put a lot of energy into it, really loved it for really dumb LA reasons,
Okay.
and didn't know what to do with myself. So I had a friend who was in law school, and my husband and I went over to his house one night. It was him and his girlfriend, actually. And there was a guest there who was also in law school with him, who happened to be from my hometown, which is ridiculous.
Where is your hometown?
Barberton, Ohio.
Wow.
So,
you were-
and it's a
this
small
was
town.
This was in California?
This was in
Ohio?
California. Yeah,
Okay.
Santa Monica.
Okay.
And it was I went to an unaccredited law school.
Mm.
It was sort of based on Mao's Little Red Book. You had to be an activist to get in, so you can, sort of pump up your...
Wait. When was this? Like in the 60s?
No, it was in the 80s.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Okay.
the school started in...
What was the requirements? Like, you have
No
to go-
requirements.
No
No
requirements?
No requirements.
Just pay?
Yeah,
the
and you
tuition?
didn't even have to pay much.
What?
It cost me $500 a year.
Wow.
Exactly.
Is there such thing now?
They just lost their They just lost their ability to grant a degree last year.
Okay, so for the people who don't realize or don't understand what accredited and non-accredited
Mhm.
or is what?
Accredited is accredited by the state bar. And you have to meet certain requirements, and apparently they didn't. Well, no, they were deliberately unaccredited
Okay.
because it was an opportunity. It was a group of four. It was Asian Americans, Latino Americans, Black Americans, and West Side liberals
Okay.
who got together thinking that the opportunity for people to go to law school
Mm.
is not good for minorities.
Look at this. So the attorneys in California, it's almost 200,000 active.
That would have been now I know after the fact it seems bad, but that would have been my guess, 200,000.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
But inactive is about 76,000. The judges are 2,300. And so this is it, huh? Non-eligible to practice law in California. Those are 20,000, but that's what? The people who
Disbarred.
lost?
Yeah,
License?
disbarred. Yeah.
Oh, okay, disbarred. Wow. Okay. So that's a lot. And average age is 50 for active attorneys, right? That's pretty.
It
a
is.
lot.
I mean,
No?
we don't retire.
You don't
I mean,
retire. Yeah.
usually it's because we don't have money to retire.
Oh.
I know generally people think that attorneys have a lot of money, but
Mm.
only, I mean, real estate attorneys, corporate attorneys, they can make a lot of money.
Right. But let me back up. So your friends were going to law school?
And they
But
said,
it wasn't this law school, right? It was a different law
yeah,
school.
no, it was this law school. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so it was
Okay.
really, what are you going to do? Why don't you just try it?
Okay.
I mean, and I've never hired an attorney. I have never known an attorney.
Okay.
So I didn't really know what I was getting into. When I first started to start reading the books, I mean, I had to look up like every other word in the sentence because I didn't know what they were
So how
talking
many
about.
years was that?
That's, it was 3 years part-time, I think,
Really?
because I work full-time too.
Doing what? The A&R thing?
Yeah, the
Okay.
A&R thing. Yeah.
So while you
Well,
were
the
doing...
A&R thing for the beginning, maybe the first year and a half, and then I taught paralegal school.
Okay. You taught.
Yes, I taught.
Wow. Okay. So after you graduated, what'd you do? You didn't go to law school. I mean, you didn't go to law firm. You
No,
went on your own.
no. I would have never been hired
No?
because of the law school that I went to.
Okay.
ACLU might have hired me.
Okay.
National Lawyers Guild might have hired me, but that's about it.
And then what did you do then?
I was waiting for I wanted to make sure I passed the bar. And so
How difficult was that, the state bar?
well, the first time I didn't pass
Okay.
because I didn't study enough and I didn't look at prior exams. My understanding was that you go in and you write an essay. And so I wrote an essay, and you don't really write an essay. You make bullet points. You make an outline because you don't have time to write an essay. So the second time around, once I looked at past practice exams, it was pretty easy to figure out. But it's emotionally really straining.
How many days is that?
It was 3 days at that time, over 14 subjects.
Okay.
And you do what are multi-states, which are multiple choice questions where there are 2 right answers. And one of the right answers is wrong because you go beyond what we call the call of the question.
Oh.
In other words, you can't consider facts that are not in the fact pattern.
Right. Okay.
And so, so they're trick questions.
Okay.
And then you do, I think 4 essays at that time it was, and 2 practice exams where you get a file and you have to work through it and analyze it within 3 hours.
All right. So you passed it the second time.
Yes.
And then what? How did you end up with family law?
Honestly, it's what walked in the door. See,
So you just basically opened your office and put a
no, good question.
banner up or what?
The one guy that was from my hometown, he had known someone who taught bar review classes.
A what?
Bar review classes.
Okay.
That's my claim to fame. I passed without any bar review.
Okay.
But I did have the books. Anyway, so he was working out of this office that didn't really hire attorneys, but would give them cases and then take a cut of it. And so
Okay.
if you're a licensed attorney, you can do that. So it's
So you're working for somebody else?
no.
No?
I was just hanging around.
Okay.
And eventually I got a case
From?
from them.
Okay.
But they didn't ever hire me. They just, it was sort of like an
Oh, the
independent contractor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the case that they threw at you was a family law. Is that
Probably.
what it was?
Yeah, probably. I
Okay.
did a lot. There was a lot of differentiation then. And they also worked with legal insurance.
Mm.
So the pay is really bad.
The insurance company pays you?
Yes.
Oh.
And the advantage to that is that you don't have to get the money from the client
All right.
because that often creates, as you've experienced
Oh.
actually, it interferes with the attorney-client relationship
Right. Right.
because the attorney doesn't want to work for
But
free.
I mean, there's another issue that I have with an attorney, right? So people who I know are working in physical labor industry.
Right.
Gets paid by an hour.
Right.
Attorneys do too. Why is that? I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, also the fact is, I remember one of my attorney, who that I hired, and I asked about my ex-wife taking the money out of my kid's Coogan account. All right. And she's not supposed to do that. She's supposed to put the money
Yes.
in the Coogan account. And I asked him about that. And he sends me a reply saying, I don't know much about it. And I can't advise you. Next month, I get a bill where he researched about the Coogan account for half an hour. And I get billed for that,
Right.
which is ridiculous. And just to tell me that he doesn't know anything about it. Right? I mean, it's so basically, it's like, it's up to the attorney to charge you how much hours.
Right.
And also the fact that if you're not very good attorney, you will spend 2 hours. But if you're a good attorney,
Yeah. That's
you can do that
absolutely
in like
true.
15
Right.
minutes.
The
Right.
more competent you are, the longer it takes to do whatever
it's,
it is.
It's kind of ridiculous.
It is kind of ridiculous.
Right? Although the hourly might be different, but at the end of the day, net, it's much better to hire somebody who's capable
Right.
and charge me for 15 minutes instead of 3 hours.
Right.
You know what I mean? So.
The problem with flat fee, now some attorneys will do flat fee,
Right, but they don't want to do that.
but you don't know what, you don't,
because
you really
can't
have,
churn them.
well,
It's ridiculous.
you can't churn it, but you also don't know what's going to happen.
All right.
In other words, it's, you're dealing with a situation where you've got your own client, the other party, and the other attorney, and the judge, and perhaps minors counsel, or, there are all these, in other words, it can sort of blow up. And you could estimate that, well, it's going to cost a few $1,000s, and then it ends up being totally different
Right, but
than what
that's
you
like a double-edged
anticipated.
sword, right? I mean, it's a win-win situation. Could be,
Could be,
right? And also, I mean, that's a chance that you take as an
Yes.
attorney.
yes.
It's something that you charge $5,000, but end up only being $3,000, but
Right.
you get paid $5,000.
Right.
And also, you will have an incentive to close the deal or finish the deal, and you
Right.
know, expedite this divorce situation,
Right.
or any kind of a legal situation.
Yes.
Right.
See, and if you're a good negotiator,
right,
but again, it depends on the other side.
right.
I mean, your
You're right, yeah.
case is a prime example.
yeah.
No,
They
I
had
mean,
no intention of finishing it up.
I don't think yes is in your ex-wife's vocabulary.
I know, it's so ridiculous. And also the fact that her attorney, even though you tell me that my ex-wife is ultimately the boss and makes a decision, but my, opposing counsel when I was pro per, I mean, he was an asshole. He was nasty.
He was really an asshole.
But he, not only an asshole, he was unethical and liar. He was telling the judge that he served me some papers, which he never did.
Right.
And the judge told him, you have another month to, to file the proof of service. A month later, we go back, and he still says he served me, but he doesn't have any proof of service.
Well, now
And
certain
judge
sorry.
ultimately told me that I was lying
right.
because I'm an attorney, which is ridiculous.
Well, certain judges would have actually given you more respect
Right.
and said and made him prove that he served you with the proof of service.
Right. But instead, this Judge Pellman, she came in and, I mean, my divorce, it took 4 years. And how many judges?
It's not even
4.
done. It has
I
taken.
know, it hasn't even done.
It
It's
has
ridiculous.
taken for you.
Because even though the final decision came out in December of last year, and it was ordered by the judge for my ex-wife's attorney to finish up the draft of the final, what do you call it? The decision?
Judgment.
Judgment to be
Right.
signed.
Right.
He never did. And I requested to be sent, and he never responded. And it's been 3 months, So I had to do it on my own. I mean, that kind of action, is that okay as an attorney to do?
No.
No, right? That's why I complain at the state bar.
Right.
See what happens. But at the end of the day, state bar is not going to do anything.
No, because it's if he were your attorney,
Mm-hmm.
they would.
Okay.
But see, so many people will complain about the opposing side
Right.
that they take it. I
But
mean, whether
also
they
the-
should or not, but they take it less seriously.
But also the fact that they had, he had this, he claimed that the transcript, not transcript, the hearing that we had back in August, the judge said something and the witness said something, but was not reflected in the minute order. So he refused to make it as a final judgment, waiting for the transcript.
He the judge or he the attorney?
He the attorney.
Okay.
And he claimed he represented to the court that the transcript is on its way. And it took 3 months and never arrived. He said, "Oh yeah, the court reporter is MIA." Okay. And
Now,
this-
your attorney could have contacted the court reporter.
I know, but he didn't because it
know.
costs money, right? And also, he also said, "Oh yeah, the opposing counsel's name, Pedram Mansouri." He goes, "Pedram says it's on its way. It's on its way." It goes on, a week later, and then after 3 months later, right before the final judgment, the judge goes, you have to submit a written final argument, and on that deadline, he submits the transcript. So we can argue anything about that, right?
But see, the way to fix it, though, is really, I mean, you can't really control what the other guy does.
Right.
All you can do is control what you do.
What do you call it? Exculpatory evidence?
Exculpatory? That's the
Exculpatory
word.
evidence, right? That's like and it's basically he's supposed to provide that information.
Well,
as
no,
an
not
opposing
necessarily. In other words, you could have ordered the transcript. You
Right.
could have, your attorney could have offered to pay half.
Right.
Um,
But he kept saying, the Pedram kept saying, "Oh, it's on its way."
right,
it's on
but he
its
could
way."
have really, he could have
He could have
just,
called his
I mean, it's
bullshit.
easy to Monday morning quarterback.
Right.
But to just call, I mean, it would take 5 minutes.
Right.
Call email her or him
Yeah. Anyway,
and
so
say, is it done? Where is it?
right. So going back to, let me just finish up my case by saying there are so many things that could have been done, but at
Right.
the end of the day,
Right.
like I said, if it was a corporate attorney, it was a real attorney, it was an ethical attorney, then this will never happen. We didn't have to worry about shit like that. You know what I mean? So I think the family law, to me, it seems like it brings out the worst in you.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Right? And the judges, I went through, like I said, 4 judges. And every time the judge comes in, he or she was a corporate attorney like 6 months ago, just became a family attorney.
Right.
Or maybe went to a traffic court judge and became a family attorney, a judge after that.
A lot of people who become judges don't really want to sit in the family law.
I know. So they
Because
stay there
it's
for like
too
6 months to a
crazy.
year and then go somewhere else. So they don't really know. They don't care. And basically they rely on attorneys, family attorneys, who's been there for like 10 years, who will tell you, "Oh, this is the way it is." And then the judge will say, "Oh, okay, we'll do that." That was the whole situation with me every single time, and the judge will say, "You're not an attorney. I believe the attorney," and Judge Pellman said that in open court about serving me. I told her I'd never been served. I even, asked for it.
I understand your frustration. You can't prove a negative.
I know.
There's no way to prove that you weren't
Right.
served.
Right.
It's up to him to prove that you were served.
right.
See, and she's back to what you said in the very beginning. The as an officer of the court,
Mm.
she almost has to believe him.
Right.
I mean, in the sense that
understand.
he's not supposed to lie.
Right.
But, and if I recall correctly, she sort of just got fed up with it and had him serve you in the courtroom, right?
No, he did.
Or the
bailiff did.
The bailiff did. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he could have actually done it, but
Right. So anyway, just to close this thing up here, as an attorney, as a family attorney specialist, what do you advise those people who are about to get married? Is there any advice, or not get married, or what?
they should. There should be a
Prenup?
session that they have to do to explain that when they get married in California, that everything becomes community property.
We all know that.
No, you don't.
No.
No.
Oh.
No, I mean, I was talking to a client on the way in on the telephone,
Yeah.
and they still are very resentful that their salary paid all the bills.
Mm.
And their wife's income, although it was not very much, went into her savings account. So when at the end of the day, all of the contributions that form the equity in the community estate were made by one party. But since it's community property, it belongs to both
It
of them.
splits in half.
See, and when you start out, you don't think about what's going to happen if you split up.
All right. What about the custody issue? Children. I mean, they always get in the middle of it, right? This is my understanding, and in Japan, from my understanding, children, they don't have rights. That's why the parents are responsible for their children's activities, their actions, whatever, right? and the court, the family court in Japan will decide what's the best interest of the children.
So
and
how
who
do they
gets it.
decide? Because
And I
it's
think
very
it's
interesting.
mostly, I think, the financial. Right? If father is
Okay.
the one who's making, or mother's making more money
Mhm.
and be available for the children, then that's what happens. The custody goes to the most, the person who can actually best support the
Right.
children.
It's the opposite
Instead
here.
of saying, you give me the money and give it to her so that she can support the children.
Right.
That's not how it works. What do you think about that?
Well, determining the best interest of the child is very difficult, and it's
Of course,
obviously
yeah.
value-based. But in general, they look at who has really spent the most time with the kids, or really is, and generally it's the mom, because dad is the higher earner and dad's out working, and so mom's job isn't maybe as important.
Isn't that like a sexist
Of
thing?
course. But I mean, as a
Ah.
practical matter, isn't that the case?
Okay. But I thought it was supposed to be that way.
This,
It's supposed to be equal.
well, but
By
I mean,
law, no?
well, yes, by law it is.
Mhm.
But it's so which parent, so that's the problem. In other words, they don't realize that the relationship when together is very different than the relationship when you separate. In other words, just because the mom parent, or I should, without even being mom and dad, but parent one and parent two, if I can be
Yeah.
politically correct. The parent one has had the luxury of maybe staying home half time and spending more time with the kids and helping them with their homework and doing whatever has to be done. That once you separate, it's totally different.
Right.
And there has been a movement in California, but nobody has really determined finally that we should start off with 50-50. Like legally.
It should not be, or
No, it should be.
Should be,
In
right?
other words, you guys have to prove to me, the judicial officer, that there is a reason why it shouldn't be 50-50.
Right.
And it doesn't really start off that way. It's really to maintain substantial contact with both parents. Well, what does that mean?
Right. But isn't it true that, I mean, it's everybody's belief that it's good to have, children should have a contact with both parents.
Of course.
Right?
But if kids are in school and the parents live, 45 minutes, an hour away,
Right.
it's almost impossible to have 50-50.
It's difficult. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, also, another aspect that I learned is that which parent is most likely to co-parent?
Yes.
Right? Co-parent is the key word. Willing to co-parent, raise the children together, as even though it's a different, separate, family now.
That is one of the legal considerations. I found it difficult to get the judge to really focus on that.
So
But I think it's important. I
do they
mean, and so
usually
does the
focus on?
code.
Money or mom,
No, status quo.
Sex?
Status quo.
which is mom.
That's your
Yeah,
experience, right?
Yeah,
Status quo.
yeah, yeah. It's ridiculous.
In other
Yeah.
words, when you split up, if one of you leaves the house, the kids have to be with somebody.
It's supposed to be.
And so usually the leaving party I shouldn't say usually.
Although my ex-wife, when she went over to Japan by herself and left the children, she didn't tell me about it, and my children were sleeping at her aunt's place, and I try to get the custody of my children while she's gone. I don't get that.
Well, you could
No.
have if there's a thing called the right of first refusal,
No, but
but
I
you have
know.
to get the order.
Exactly. And I didn't get that.
And
I couldn't get
it's
that.
also something that isn't necessary. It depends. See, if you guys get along, that's great.
Yeah,
But if you don't, it's just one more obstacle.
right.
So,
But at the end of the day, to me, I mean, to cut through all this bullshit, the family law divorce is just two things: money, and if you have a children, custody.
Yeah.
That's it.
and it's usually custody.
Is it?
Well, because most of the laws are okay. The laws, in other words, the legislature makes laws, and then the appellate courts interpret the laws.
Okay.
The only people who can go to the appellate courts are people with money.
Mm.
So most of the decisions are based upon people with, high assets because they can afford to go to court. But, normal people, they can't really even afford to hire an attorney.
Right. And
So
if you don't have an attorney, I mean, remember, like we talked about the final judgment, the opposing counsel, Pedram Mansouri, would not obey the court order and
Right.
finalize it. So
Right.
I had to do it.
Right.
And I had to figure out how to file it.
Right.
And nobody tells you how to do it. And I actually contacted the
self-help people. Yes.
self-help people in court, and they said, well, you're not, it was a contested trial,
Right.
so we can't help you.
Right.
And then they suggested that I call the legal aid service
Yes.
and
Levitt Quinn.
Levin
is it?
Quinn, people
Levitt
like
Quinn,
that.
yeah.
And the first thing they will ask me is like, are you a domestic violence victim? I'm like, no.
You should've
Well, we
said
can't help you.
yes.
I know. It's so
No,
ridiculous.
I mean,
so
she-
people like me, I'm capable of filing it. I'm capable of learning it and doing it if there is a way to find out of how to do it. But there isn't. There's no such thing,
Well, and yours was a pretty complicated. I mean, your case wasn't complicated at all, but it just
They made
got
it.
really complicated.
Yeah.
Where normally they help, two people without attorneys. They go in, they have a trial, and the judge really says, okay, what's the value of this? What's the value of that? You get this, you get that. And so it's a simple thing that the self-help people can do because
Right.
they will send them directly to the self-help department in Central to
Mm,
help them prepare the judgment.
Right.
And you can't imagine how many pro pers there are.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you go to I was in a courtroom last week and I was the only attorney in there.
Really?
Yeah. Everybody else was, well, I mean, a lot of attorneys are appearing remotely now,
Right.
but the courtroom was full and it was people without an attorney.
I mean, a lot of people think it's just a racket, this family court.
It's
It's
well,
so
it's not. It's a
ridiculous. Because
it,
unless you know how to, there are many people who can do it on their own. If there is a way, if there's a chart that says, okay, for this, you have to file this in how many days and you have to serve it this way. And if they know the procedure,
there is
we can do it ourselves.
well, no,
We don't
you
need an
can't because
attorney.
the other side's not going to cooperate. In other
Right.
words, if the two of you
Because
work
that's
together,
what I'm saying. It's a racket. Because the other
Well-
attorney will not cooperate. Because,
but see, it's the party that isn't cooperating. I understand you're saying the
No, no, but
attorney
what-
is
filing
supporting
things.
that, but
filing documents, filing proper documents,
right.
you know.
There is actually a guide on the LA Court website.
No, I looked at it. No. it's
Didn't
not-
help?
No, didn't help.
Okay.
It's ridiculous.
No, not for that, but for how to file the
Well,
initial
yeah,
paperwork.
I know. I've seen that. And I even made a chart on my own, my table on my own.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know.
Did it help?
I mean, during COVID,
Did it
there's
help?
so much time. No. So going back to you, okay?
Yes.
So much for this stupid family law, even though that's your profession. Did you want to do any other law? At
Yes.
all?
Yes. When I went to law school, I wanted to do intellectual property.
Okay. So IP is very, very timely right
Yes.
now. Yeah. But you're not going to do that anymore?
No.
Why?
Well, I never did do it.
But you can go to that. You can get into that.
I
now.
could. It's I've gone to a few seminars with with entertainment law,
Okay.
but it's a nuance into it. I'm sort of over it. Then I was still in the business.
What about
and-
now? Anything?
No.
No. But also, you have a very political view, very, very strong political view, if I say, right?
About family law.
No, about
No,
everything.
about everything. Yes.
About what's going on now.
Right. Yes.
Well, what's going on now? The world's coming to an end. It's what it is.
No, the world isn't coming to an end, but
No.
our constitutional system is being challenged.
How so?
Mr. Trump wants to expand. Now that's probably disrespectful. President Trump
Okay.
wants to expand his executive power,
Okay.
and he is, at least it seems to be, that he is refusing to follow the court orders.
Do you know much about the constitutional law?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because I think a lot of people don't understand this, and
Yes.
I don't understand it.
Yes.
In order to pass a law, you have to go through Congress.
Correct.
Right?
No, you don't go through Congress. Congress passes
Congress
the law.
passes the law,
Yeah.
and then
Except there are
And
all
then-
these private people. I mean, there is a nonprofit organization that is going through all the states writing laws for the legislature.
right. But the legislature,
But
Make-
technically, they
make the law.
they make the law.
And then, well, actually, but right now, these executive orders. I mean, what is the threshold, or what are the limits, or what are the requirements, or what are the controlling factor that allows president to make executive order that doesn't have to go through the legislature? What is that?
Well, we'll
That's
find
what I'm
out. There are 22 cases right now
Okay,
where people have challenged
right. But in
his
order to
ability to do this. I mean, in these certain areas. In other words, he's allowed to make. President Biden made executive orders
Right.
too. I don't know. I think it's only fairly recently that there have been so many executive orders because there's been so much division in Congress. But they really should deal with the executive is supposed to implement the laws.
Right, exactly. By signing into the law. So, what my question is, I mean, I'm sure Trump is not the only person. Biden's
Right.
not the only person. There's
Right.
been an executive order.
Right.
In order to declare war on a different country, you have to go through legislature, Congress approval. But is there a threshold? Is there a limit to how much?
That's what's happening
But
right now. We're going to
where
find
does
out.
it say? Does it say in the
court says.
Constitution? Does it say in the Constitution on
No.
which
No, it doesn't say anything
No?
about executive orders. So the Constitution is really sort of deliberately vague
right,
in certain areas
right,
and also pretty limited.
okay,
And so the people that interpret what the Constitution says are the courts.
right, exactly. I know, but then if I was a president, fuck Congress. I'll just write executive order and see what sticks.
That's exactly what's happening.
Right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do that? Might as well, right? It's
No,
probably
because
the
it's-
fastest way to do it, right?
No,
get things
it's-
done. Because the Congress
But
is
it isn't
divided.
really-
If
it's
I
not up
feel
to-
that I should be in the best interest of the citizen that I represent, and Congress is fighting and bickering over some bullshit, I just say, fuck it. I'm just going to write executive
that's
order
not
as
your-
much as I can.
That's not your job.
No,
It's their job.
But according to the Constitution, it's very vague, in which it gives me a power to do that, and it doesn't say my power is limited to not to do that. In other words,
Actually,
I'm just trying to be.
No, I understand.
devil's
It
advocate
does limit. It limits federal power a lot. Everything that is not specifically designated to the federal government is supposed to be left up to the states.
Right.
That has radically expanded because of what is called the Commerce Clause.
No, isn't it by, like, for example, like, tell me if I'm, understanding correctly about the Roe v. Wade. All right, it's been overturned. Now it doesn't say that the federal law says what. It doesn't say that
There's
it's
nothing.
illegal.
Federal law says nothing. Right.
Right?
Right.
So it's up to
Okay,
the state. It's up to the state.
Yes.
Right.
But what
right.
Roe v. Wade did
Was gave
is-
protection. Right.
was
Gave the
say
right.
that it is that refusal is a constitutional violation because of a right to privacy. It's sort of, and this right to privacy, I mean, we've been fighting this since the 60s.
Right.
And the I was going to say the conservatives, but everybody's switched now.
Okay.
I mean, now the Republican Party is the working man's party, and
That's so stupid.
the
I mean,
Democratic Party is the party of the
a
elite. So I
two-party
don't know.
system, right?
Yeah.
And the fact is, you have to belong to either of them, right? Which is kind of ridiculous.
You don't have to.
You don't have to, but yet
You don't get to
it's
vote
all
in the
divided into-
primary. That's the
Exactly,
difference.
right? So, I mean, of course, it's very difficult to have many, 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 many parties. Like in Japan, we have so many.
You have a
small
parliament,
parties.
yes?
Yes, but
It gives more. It allows for more voices to be heard.
it does. But also the fact that it actually in Japan, from what I understood and understand it, and what I felt when I was back there, going back and forth between 2017 more often than not, that the government and the congressman or senator, whatever you call it over there, they tend to answer more to their what do you call it?
But the party?
The people,
Oh,
right?
well, it's way smaller.
It's very small, but
See, because it functions really well in England too, which is where we're adopting our system from them.
right.
In other words, you have an office and people are pounding on the door. Here, I mean, our representatives have offices in town, but I mean, have you ever called one of them?
Not really, no.
Me neither.
No. All right. But what?
But people do. But I mean, I think it's more effective in a smaller area because you really, you meet face to face and we're just so big.
Right.
That,
So what's the answer to that?
I don't know. That's a big question. One could have some people think local rule is better,
Mm-hmm.
but, and that's really, in a way, if, with respect, back to Roe v. Wade,
Right.
if maybe it's okay if you want to live in a state that prohibits abortion, maybe that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Is it?
Maybe you should move.
Right.
That's what they say.
Right.
In other words, it's.
But isn't that like a double-edged sword where, it's.
But see, to some people, it's murder.
No, I understand that. But like, for example, if this was 50 different countries, right?
You're
Instead of
right.
states, like
And in a way, it is.
it is.
Because we have a federal system and, the states retained a lot of power.
Right.
But the federal government, see, that's the thing. The federal government has, for a party that was supposed to be states' rights, meaning the GOP,
Mm-hmm.
that's not how they're acting now. That's what they say, but that's not what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. No, like you said, the blue and red became basically flipped.
Yes,
Right?
basically flipped.
Basically flipped. And the fact that blue used to be the party of the people, right?
Well, but see, red used to be. The Civil War.
Right,
he was
way back. So it's
he was a Republican.
It all depends on
the Democrats,
the time, right?
The Southern Democrats used to be the racists,
Right.
in the
So
60s.
it all depends on the time and how
Right.
the people progressing or what have you.
We are living in fascinating times.
It is. It is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's very unique in a way.
See, and we're learning through this. This is why I love the law. We are really learning the answers to all those questions that you're asking by going through this ridiculous process. I don't know what's going to happen with respect to our relationship with the rest of the world and everything, because we're doing it in front of everybody.
That's a major thing.
But,
Yeah.
we're really trying to figure out what these things really mean.
What do you think about the tariffs that he's putting in
Well,
all these places? Well, let me say this. So,
Well, no, what I think about the tariffs is that President Trump's representation of what the tariffs will be is inane.
Hmm.
China does not pay for the tariffs.
right.
Our consumers pay for the tariffs.
I understand. But the thing is,
the idea is if we stop goods coming in from China, we're going to start producing them
Manufacturing
ourselves.
ourselves.
That's not going to happen.
right. But the thing is,
It's
during the 80s.
that happened in the 80s, right?
Right. So let me tell you. Let me ask you this. So
Maybe
during the
the
80s,
70s.
when Reagan opened up the market, right, free trade and all that stuff, and all the manufacturing went over to the cheaper labor, right? Because why? The standard of living in the industrial countries has gone up. They couldn't keep manufacturing, product at like $3 per hour, right? So every labor, went to the cheap labor in China.
Right.
I know this because when I grew up in Hong Kong, okay, and my father moved to Hong Kong when I was 4 years old, because my father had electronic manufacturing company, and started building
In Hong Kong.
Right. So he had a factory in Hong Kong, using cheap labor, and at one point, we had about 1,000, employees. And I remember, just a little sidetrack, like when I was in summer of 8th grade or something, I started working as a part-time at my dad's company, and I was delivery boy, packaging and delivering all these electronic equipment.
See, now here you couldn't do that.
You can't do that. So
Child labor.
Right, exactly. But anyway, that's how I started learning about the business, But anyway, so during that time, the standard of living in Hong Kong and China was very low. And it's obvious at the time that 20, 30, 40 years from then, the lifestyle is going to go up, right? Now the labor cost is going to go up, right? So the product's going to be more expensive. But at the same time, this industrial, basically U.S., who basically subcontracted all this manufacturing to overseas, their standard of living has gone up as well, right? But in order for them
Not
to
for the worker, though.
not for the workers, but in order for them to live nicely, they were using the cheaper labor to manufacture stuff and import
I know,
it,
but
so the product will be
but
cheaper.
they are the owners, not the workers.
Right. But I'm talking about the workers.
And it's
Here,
arguable. It's arguable that labor got a little bit too full of themselves.
well, I'm just telling you this because it's very similar in Japan. Japan, the manufacturing has gone down because the labor cost is so high.
Ah,
Right?
well,
So-
and they're competing with China,
No,
right?
but the China has much more, much cheaper labor,
right?
right? But
That's
in
what I mean.
Japan, in the early years, it was a technical, very difficult quality control product.
Do you
We're
rem-
manufacturing in Japan.
Do you remember when Japanese cars started? I don't know if you were here then. When the Japanese cars started coming into the U.S.
Oh yeah,
in
that
the,
was
the
in the
early
80s.
'70s. No, I got a Honda Civic.
Honda Civic,
It had
Honda
a
Accord.
motorcycle engine.
Yeah, did you know that
3-speed.
Honda was
It
not?
was a great car.
It was not the most biggest manufacturer of cars in Japan, all right? But that they were more, much prominent in U.S. because they're the first one who came out with Civic and Accord and all that stuff,
Right.
But anyway, so these Japanese, labor force dwindled as the labor costs went up, all right? So the standard living, going back to the U.S., standard living, in order for them to maintain the standard of living, they had the cheap goods coming in from China, right? Now,
But see, that's the companies. The reason why, at least this is my opinion, the reason why we have maintained the standard of living as we had is because women went to work.
well, that's true too.
Because in
more
those
labor
days,
force.
you could have a factory job and you could support a family. You could buy a house. This is like everybody's mantra right now.
Right.
You could have 2 cars with one worker,
Right.
and mom could stay home and watch the kids.
No, but the thing is, I'm just going back to Trump's tariffs issue, right?
Right.
In order for the manufacturing to come back,
But
here-
it's not coming back.
No, they just say
No, but it'll take 10 years for people to develop a factory.
no. So let's say because of the tariff, 25% tariff, it's cheaper to make
Yeah.
it here.
I'll bet you.
That is.
If I'm alive
No,
in
no.
10 years,
I'm just saying that is the reason why he's doing this, right? Hopefully, it's going to go back. No.
it's no.
Okay. Why is he doing this?
He wants to see how much power he can take. No, seriously.
Okay.
And not even necessarily it's a bad thing.
You know what the inflation rate
No,
is right
that's
now?
his nature. He thinks he's the CEO of the United States.
Well, that's what his view is.
Right.
That's how he's controlling the country.
Right.
He's trying
And
to
he's
manage
not
the
controlling the country.
Well, he's trying to
FYI.
manage a company.
But
or
yeah,
country.
right. No,
Yeah.
and that isn't how it works.
Okay.
But we'll see.
Right.
In other words, is our checks and balances system strong enough to fight him?
Mm.
Or to fight, not necessarily,
just-
let's not even make it personal to him, but to fight a grab of executive power.
Mm. So my
Should he be able to fire half of the federal government on his fucking own?
Right.
Pardon my French.
But even if it does, right? What's going to happen? What's the end game? That's what my question is.
The
So instead
end-
of having, for example, 100,000 federal employees, I don't know what the number is.
The
maybe
end
200,
game of the
but it
Republican
goes into
Party,
half. What
the
happens?
end game from the Republican Party since the New Deal has been to destroy the government,
Okay.
to destroy the bureaucracy of the government.
Okay.
Because the oligarchs, this is sort of, but the people who, I guess oligarchs is a good word.
Yeah, we used to use that for Russian, right? Political system and oligarch.
we did.
Only
But
few
that-
people who makes money who knows Putin, right? But
Right.
it's very similar here. If you look under the hood, it's basically the same thing here as well.
Right. It's all,
Right, exactly. yeah.
the people with money always, throughout history, have done this, and so democracy. The idea is to take the power away from them, give it to the people. But is it a mirage?
Mm-hmm. So my argument was not my argument. My point was, by increasing the tariff, right?
Mhm.
Either you buy the expensive stuff or start manufacturing it here. By manufacturing here, the labor cost is high. So even then, the price is going to go up. So your standard of living has to go up.
No,
the
your
inflation
standard of
has
living,
to go up.
No, but see, you're looking at it.
I'm not saying it's
no,
standard of
you're
living.
looking at it from the manufacturer's point of view. The consumer's standard of living isn't going up. They're paying
I understand
more.
that. But what I'm saying is that in consumers' point, their standard has to go up in order to keep up with that. In order for you to pay a bottle of whiskey that
but
was
how is that gonna
basically
happen?
bourbon that was costing, like
Right.
$20, now you have to pay $60 with inflation.
No, they're not
because
gonna
the
buy
price is going
bourbon.
up, right? So either
they're not
you
gonna buy
forfeit that, or you
But
have
how
to
is
make
their
more
standard?
living.
I know, but you
So
have to
in
make
order
more
to
money.
do that, you have to pay more money. You have to pay more money to the labor cost. But in order to do that, it's going to go
Again,
huge
you're
inflation.
I know, but again, you're looking at it from the manufacturer's point of view. You have to pay more labor costs. No, I'm looking at it from the labor's point of view.
Right.
In other words, how is all of these guys,
but what
all
I'm
of these
saying-
MAGA guys, let's assume they're all working class. They're not all. But their whole argument, I listened to, what is this, Charlie Kirk?
I don't know.
Okay, Governor Newsom started a podcast.
Right.
And he's getting so much flack for it. I am really enjoying it.
Okay.
Because he's bringing in the other side,
Right.
and he's attempting to have a reasonable conversation. And I learned a lot from this podcast that I watched last night with, I think his name is Charlie Kirk.
Okay.
And what I think that he's more sincere than President Trump.
Okay.
But the idea really is that there has been no place for all of these uneducated white guys to go. And white guys have been, the substance of jokes now. I mean, probably since the feminist movement in the 70s.
Okay.
And it's gotten really strong in the past 10 years where white guys are getting blamed for everything. Now, if you're a white guy, you're going to get fed up with that.
Right.
Because there are lots of reasons for lots of things. And there's no place for them to go to earn a living where they can support a family if they don't have a college degree.
No, I understand. So my point was just to close up my point, right? You said the manufacturer
forget
has
what it
to
was.
the manufacturer has to go, the prices go up and what have you, right?
Yeah.
And you're saying from the consumer side, what I'm saying is the consumer needs to demand more for their labor, for their hourly, for their cost.
But they can't.
That's what they have to do.
But
or
they
else
can't.
it's going to
Labor unions, hello.
Right. So it's not
And-
going
and
to hold.
7
That's what I'm saying.
The percentage of labor, okay, I just saw a statistic. It was something like 52%, back in the 50s and 60s. And now it's 7.9% of the population is in a labor union, and and that's another reason. Government employees are protected by a union.
Oh.
And that's another thing.
Let's not get into the union stuff.
Yeah, that the
okay?
Trump, the union supported my mother for 40 years after she retired.
There's a good and bad. I'm in the union called SAG, Screen Actors
Yes.
Guild, right? But in the 80s, when I was talking to a Japanese company, when I started going into labor force, I guess, when I graduated from college, is that the Japanese view of American labor force is that there's too strong of a union.
Right.
In order to screw a light bulb, you have to have one guy holding the ladder, one guy handing over the light bulb, another guy
Right.
to screw it.
No,
and
to
another guy
some extent,
turn it
that's
on.
true. That's what I
Right?
meant earlier when I said they took it too far.
Right.
In
right.
other words, they have to accept some responsibility because that's not part of my job. I don't do that. I mean, you can even see it on a road crew.
No, of course. Yeah.
There's one guy down there doing the
With a
work, and
dolly,
there's
yeah.
3 guys watching him.
Yeah. But I mean, it does have a good part and
Yeah.
bad part. And it's very difficult.
But with the only way the worker can negotiate with management is
Right.
through a union.
Right.
You have to join together. It's the only way you can do it.
No, I understand. Yeah. But when you get that, when that becomes too strong,
Right. Well, see,
and
but
there's an issue.
and they need to, meaning the union reps, they need to really sort of own that.
Right. Right.
It has to be sort of a fair negotiation. But anyway, the current administration is anti-union. I mean, and the GOP has been anti-union for quite some time.
Right. Right.
But it's the only way you can get a fair wage.
Well, we'll see what's going to happen.
Unless you get a sort of magnanimous owner.
Right.
In other words, it is possible
That
that somebody actually cares about their workers and will pay them good wages.
I mean, I don't. Well, yeah. Well, it's a very, very difficult to have a capitalistic society to not, look for the bottom line. That's the ultimate goal for the capitalist country.
We
right?
need to find a new way. And
Right.
if we don't accept the possibility of discussion and change,
Mm.
we're not going to find a new way. But capitalism is unsustainable.
Well, what did they say? I heard this somewhere that says capitalism is like the worst way to run a country, but until you see the other way.
Yeah, I think that was
Right.
Churchill.
Yeah.
Somebody,
Was it?
yes.
Yeah. But anyway, so we'll see what happens with Trump.
Yes. No,
right?
I mean, it's
There's
going to
nothing
be...
we can do about it. So,
Well,
hopefully,
you could, you could be on the streets. It's possible.
Yeah. But do you think that's going to help? What's going to happen? What's
Yes.
happening right now in New York?
I think it would
Right.
help if there were, in other words, if you had 100,000 people in the street in this
Mhm.
country, yes, it would help.
You think so?
But it won't. We have never gotten that much.
Right.
But
I mean, in Japan, if the cost of milk goes up by a penny, everybody's like arguing.
I know, but what do they
Yeah.
do?
You know,
What can they do?
I think they do contact the congressman. They
Right.
they actually do demonstrations.
Okay, well, you know what
Yeah.
our guys are doing?
What?
They're not holding down halls.
Right.
They're just like not answering the phone.
Right.
I don't know what they're doing
Why are we?
because
electing
their
these
their
people?
base is concerned
Right.
because I mean, the price of eggs did not go down on day one. I
Right.
mean,
Well, that's
well, I mean, most people know that he has no control over that.
Right. But another thing
But
that
his
I want to
base
say
didn't.
in the closing is that the information that we get nowadays, I learned that many media information are very censored or skewed, right?
Oh,
I
and
mean,
it's so easy to do.
And
I
it's,
mean,
it's very
it's-
difficult to trust, to find which one
Right,
is the real information.
right,
Right.
exactly.
There's what is it? Disinformation.
Fake news. But it isn't really fake news. It's like
malinformation.
you could take a statement of fact
Right.
and you can influence it where it's not a wrong statement, but it depends on what adjective you use.
Right.
Like if you look at really the headlines in the news, the headlines in your social media, you'll find out that the article really doesn't say what the headline says.
Right. Right.
I mean, and they will exaggerate I mean, both sides do it. They will exaggerate everything. Somebody knocked something, somebody like wailed on somebody else. Well, no, they didn't. They just said something.
Right.
I mean, it's, and
Well,
your guy and his measles.
Oh, yeah. Your
What's
guys. What are
going
we
with
talking
your
about?
guy?
What do you mean your guy?
Your guy. You're a supporter.
Who are you talking about?
RFK.
RFK. What's wrong with him?
He's telling people to take vitamin C instead of getting a measles vaccination.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah. No.
Oh, no, you're
Well,
not sure about that,
Of course
right?
not, because I'm not sure about
Exactly.
everything. I'm just, that's what the
Exactly.
headlines say.
Right. Right.
But I try to get news from a couple of different sources, not
Me too.
just.
Yeah. I think that's a good practice.
Which is why I was sort of very, very intrigued about the Gavin Newsom podcast.
Something, yeah.
Because
Okay.
he brought on Bannon,
Oh yeah.
and then he brought on one other guy, but he's bringing in the other side
Okay.
to
Well,
really
I think
discuss.
it's good that you're looking into different.
You should check it out.
sources.
It's cool. I don't know how you feel about him because he's.
That's a whole totally another.
There was a whole thing about
episode.
masculinity because
Yeah.
that's part of MAGA's point, really, that masculinity is being undermined in some way, like traditional. What is American masculinity? What is masculinity?
Mm.
That all of the men are getting wussy. They're being all polite and sensitive.
Well, that's another episode.
Okay,
All right. So anyway, we got very
we have solved
interesting.
nothing.
Yeah, but it was good. I mean, I'd love to hear people's view and what they think about it.
And I wanna
think
wrap
people
up
who
with-
listen to this.
I want to wrap up
Yeah.
with family law and probate are what are called equity courts.
Meaning,
Meaning that originally there were two different court systems in England. One was the King's Court, one was Chancellery. And in Chancellery, you consider what's fair.
okay,
In law courts, you consider what the law is.
right,
So that's the difference in family law. There is an element of fairness in it. I know, much to your
Supposedly.
surprise.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's it's a little bit different.
Right. Hopefully, when people get there into the family court, they understand how difficult it is to get fairness or get your way. So, they'll be more susceptible to negotiation and, do it amicably. Right?
Well,
Isn't that your advice?
No, our code says we are supposed to work toward, we're supposed to settle. We're not supposed to fight.
Right.
But attorneys are trained to be advocates, blah, blah, blah. So it's a problem. And they're paid to be advocates.
There's more money, yeah.
And there's more money. So that is really a problem.
Big conflict.
But, if it was your job to decide which parent should get custody, that's a hard job.
That is a very hard job, yeah.
Because you don't really know these people.
Right. Yeah. You only go there for like, what,
Right.
hour, 2
Right.
hours, and you're supposed to decide your life.
And even
your
you can,
kid's
you
child.
can appoint minors counsel, which means the kids get an attorney.
Mm.
But then, she's an attorney. She's
What about
not
the
a social
PPA
worker.
evaluator who
Well, but
spends
see,
maybe 1 hour with you?
Well, no,
It's
they can't.
ridiculous.
No, you need to spend. It costs. The problem is, a real evaluation costs like $30,000.
Right. No, I'm talking about the court appointed.
Right, but see, they're court appointed. I mean,
That was ridiculous.
number one, if they were aces at their job, they wouldn't be working for the state.
Right.
But,
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
and I understand there's benefits, and I mean,
Right.
the state needs people too.
Okay.
But their tendency is to do what yours did, is to either sort of cut it down the middle or
Right.
kick the can down the road.
Exactly. All right, Judy.
Yes,
It was good talking
Yes.
to you.
I actually
We
didn't
gotta do it
even
again?
hardly drink.
You have another drink?
No,
Okay.
I still have my drink. You did.
All right.
We didn't
Cheers.
drink much. I guess
I
that's
did.
good. You did?
I did, yeah. Cheers.